Hey guys, this is Hector from the Insert Name FC podcast here to tell you guys about Canadips. It is a great tasting, superior alternative to traditional dip using CBD in a way that is radical, enjoyable, and effective. It comes in 5 core flavors: wintergreen, mint, citrus, mango, and American spice. Canadips CBD is the new evolution in dip, allowing guys to enjoy great, long-lasting taste without the downsides. If you guys want to go ahead and try them out, use the code BellyUp20 at CanadipsCBD.com. Once again, BellyUp20 at CanadipsCBD.com, and you'll get yourself 20% off your purchase. Thank you again for Canadips for being a great partner of BellyUpSports. For people that don't understand MLS Cup, or at least how the playoffs work here in the MLS, it's the same format from last year, but if you guys don't know, here's a quick refresher. So on Tuesday and Wednesday, which, like I said, by the time this episode dropped, it's already happened, was the wildcard game. Is the 2 8th and 9th place team on the Eastern and Western Conference. They play a one game, and the winner goes and plays the first seed of their respective conference into the first round. So first round, which kicks off Friday, October 25th, and goes all the way to November 10th. Those games are okay. That makes anyways. That doesn't matter. So those games will be a best of 3 series. So each team will face off. First team to win 2 games moves on to the next round. And then actually there's going to be an international break after the first round, so there'll be a break from there. Then they go to the conference semifinals, which is the quarterfinals for those who don't necessarily understand American sports playoff formats. The quarterfinals, which will be November 23rd and 24th. And then the conference finals, which is the semifinals, November 30th to December 1st. And then the MLS Cup final, which will be December 7th, which it continues on the ongoing tradition of having the MLS Cup around my birthday. So if you guys don't know, my birthday is December 12th. But it's way before my birthday, but it usually falls on the weekend around my birthday. So it's just a fun fact of how MLS concludes. Is usually around my birthday. But anyways, but yeah, so that is how the MLS Cup playoffs format goes. So we'll go into we'll start things with so the way this is going to be done is I'm going to I'll go ahead and predict my wild card team for each round, but I will preview at least that matchup for both sides, for both teams, so you guys can see, if I'm right or wrong.
Whoa. That person has really gotten him or herself into quite a predicament.
Depending on how my prediction goes, but I still covered the other team just in case. But all right. But yeah, so we'll start things off with the Eastern Conference. So the playoff teams for the Eastern Conference: in first place overall, best team record, Supporter Shield winner, Inter Miami. Second place is the Columbus Crew. Third place, FC Cincinnati. Fourth place, Orlando City SC. Fifth place, Charlotte FC. Sixth place, New York City FC. Seventh, the New York Red Bulls. And in 8th is the Montreal Impact. And on 9th place is Atlanta United. Those are the 2 wildcard teams. So in the wildcard round, you got Montreal Impact taking on Atlanta United. Both teams are kind of just like not terrible, but not great either. Atlanta United basically stripped their team away. They sent Giacomakis over to Cruz Azul. Thiago Almada is no longer with the club, so it is interesting how this team has been worked around to still somehow get a playoff. Okay, if you ask me, I don't consider wildcard a playoff spot, but I mean, to each his own. Everybody has an opinion, but I mean, they're here. They have a chance at continuing on to the playoffs. And then versus Montreal Impact, kind of very similar, not necessarily had started out really well, kind of fell off, and then got back into a group, and then essentially kind of grabbed like a lot of players that nobody wanted. Caden Clark is a name that I was very interested in watching throughout Minnesota. Thought he was a really good part of Minnesota United, but that he was not happy at the situation in Minnesota, ends up going to Montreal, and I mean got Montreal into a wild card position. So I think that, and also has Joseph Martinez, who actually played for Atlanta United. So Atlanta United is having to travel to Montreal. I think that could be probably a good benefit for Montreal, obviously, because it's going to be cold. but this is a very fairly even game, I think, in my opinion. I'm gonna go with Montreal Impact. I think firepower wise, I think are probably a little bit stronger than Atlanta United's attack. So that's where I'm gonna go with. I'm gonna say Montreal Impact wins that wild card round and go right into the first round. But once again, like I said, the first round I will still predict it. I'll still make a case for both teams just in case I did none of them qualified. But all right, round one, Inter Miami, which will either take on wildcard winner Montreal Impact or Atlanta United. And I mean, for both cases, I don't see them. I think in a best of three series, I think if it was a one-off game, anything could happen. Maybe an upset, which Montreal did actually early in the season upset Inter Miami. Um, but I think that if it was a one-off game, different story. But I think, and I also think if it ends in the tie in regular time, they go straight to penalties as well. So I think when it comes down to it, when you have a best of series, it's more often than not the better team does end up winning that. And I do think Inter Miami all around is just a complete different team. Uh, Definitely obviously it's the 2016 Barcelona or whatever year you want to pick for Barcelona. It's a solid team. It's a strong team, and yeah, it's an interesting matchup. But I think at the end of it, Inter Miami, regardless if it's Montreal or Atlanta, can do fairly well. I think the challenge for at least going into Atlanta would be the turf field. But I think still in Miami, I think Miami will be in their element, a playoff atmosphere. So I think that that's going to be a very tough place to play in, and I think Inter Miami moves on regardless of who they face off against. Columbus Crew and the New York Red Bulls. I know some people see some upset potential with some of these matches because the lower seeds could be potentially a really good team. Columbus Crew to me is still all in all the most balanced team and the best team in MLS. I know people were talking about Inter Miami, but I mean when it comes to balance, Columbus Crew and to me I think Wilfred Nancy is one of the best coaches in the MLS. The Red Bulls are really good. I think they're really frisky. But I mean you give Wilfred Nancy one guaranteed two, maybe three chances to see this team play and get adapted to their playing style. So I think that could be. I think when it comes down to coaching, I think Wilfred Nancy always gets the edge out. So I'm going to take Columbus Crew to beat the Red Bulls. I don't want to say there's going to be a sweep, but I could see a sweep happening for Columbus. So I think Columbus could actually get this done in two games. I just don't think the Red Bulls can adapt to what Wilfred Nancy is going to do. And once again, I think this team is very complete. And Cucho, who is probably a front runner for MVP, who is a front runner for the MVP award. The man comes up big in big games. All right, next game is FC Cincinnati versus New York City FC. I'm just gonna be straight with you. Um, when it comes down to it, when NYCFC, Davi has said a lot of negative things of Cushing, and but this team finds ways, right? They find ways. Not coming in the prettiest of fashion, but still are in it. FC Cincinnati, I mean, another very strong team. It's crazy to think that they lose Brandon Vasquez and are still in a pretty good playoff position. Cincinnati is a very strong home crowd as well for them. They have a lot of home crowd advantage. I think that this can go to three games, and I think FC Cincinnati's home field advantage is going to come into play. Not cold wise or anything like that. I just think atmosphere wise, it's going to be beneficial. I think NYCFC is going to be interesting just because of the fact that you have, the Yankees in the World Series. So we'll see how that all goes down for them. But there's playoff atmosphere in New York, I guess. So, but I'm gonna give FC Cincinnati the edge on this one. And then Orlando City versus Charlotte FC. Charlotte very good defensively. This is to me fourth and fifth is never. I will never say there's an upset on this one because of the fact that fourth and fifth are usually pretty even opponents because it could have been either or. But look, I picked Orlando to win the MLS Cup when we previewed the MLS earlier this year. Uh, and I'm I think they're gonna get eliminated. I don't know if they're gonna get eliminated against Charlotte. Defensive, you know, it's because they're so good defensively, but the attack is just not great for me on Charlotte's side. not as great. I really wish Charlotte would have went and invested on a striker during the summer transfer window, but they didn't. They went and got Tim Ream, which I feel like their defense kind of not at they're still good defensively. It's just not as good defensively, if you get what I mean. Um, but I think Orlando has kind of found their stride after their really bad start into the season. So I'm gonna say Orlando. I think that it goes to 3 games. I think Orlando edges out against Charlotte FC. So that is my predictions for the Eastern Conference. Western Conference. All right, the playoff teams are first place LAFC, second place LA Galaxy, third place Real Salt Lake, fourth place Seattle Sounders, fifth place Houston Dynamo, sixth place Minnesota United, seventh place Colorado Rapids, and the 2 wildcard teams is eighth place Vancouver Whitecaps and the ninth place Portland Timbers. Now, I was uh 1 second. Sorry. Um it's so I'm trying to see because there I think there's something about Vancouver not being able to host their playoff game, and they're not. Even though they're the higher seeded team, they are they're going to Portland, which I think there's a conflict with Vancouver with their stadium. That's kind of disappointing, man. I feel like if that's the case, do it in a neutral site. But man, Vancouver's still a pretty good team, but I think Portland, you put them in Portland. I'm gonna say Portland wins the wild card round. Vancouver is still a really good team, a very frisky team, but I'm gonna say Portland moves on to the round one. All right, first round, LAFC taking on the winner of the wild card round. If it's Vancouver, I think it matches up a little interesting. I think both teams attack wise are really phenomenal. Defensively, I think they're fairly even to each other. And I would love this to go to 3 games if it's Vancouver. And my thing with Portland, and I'm gonna say this for Portland because I think Portland could upset LAFC. Um, the thing is with me is where they're at defensively. I think defensively has not been great for Portland this year. They can score goals, but the defending part is the tough part. And I mean LAFC is a team that definitely can supply goals. And I think if it comes down to a shootout, one, if it is Portland versus LAFC, I will say for the people that complain about low scoring games, this is probably the matchup to watch. Because I think that there's going to be a lot of goals being scored between these two if it is Portland. Um, yeah, but I could see Portland upset LAFC. I think if they can catch them by surprise in game one, um, maybe not necessarily have to win game one, but catch them by surprise in game one. Game two, they go into Portland. Obviously their atmosphere is insane, and get one and come back. And if they can score early and score big, I think it could be Portland moving on to the next round, causing an upset. But LAFC is just stout. I mean, it. You look at Argentina. I mean, you look at Inter Miami, and it's FC Barcelona from 2016. When you look at LAFC, it's France. So, um, including Danny Bouanga, and I think that attack wise, I favor Portland. I mean, I favor LAFC defensively. I will favor LAFC when it comes to Portland. Vancouver. So I'm gonna say if it's Vancouver, I say LAFC wins. I think if it's Portland, I could see it go down to penalties, and I'll still and I if it goes down to penalties for game three, I'm gonna take Portland, even if though we're talking about Ugo Lloris. But I think body language wise, Portland would have felt on top at that moment. Though I wouldn't be surprised if LAFC moves on, and they probably should move on because they are one of the better teams in the Western Conference. Um, the next matchup is second place LA Galaxy taking on seventh place Colorado Rapids. I think this is an interesting matchup. I could see an upset in this one. Um, so because Colorado is a very sneaky team. They went and got a massive overhaul this year. including Jordy Mihalovic, getting Rich Kennan, getting any guy that didn't pan out in Europe basically went to Colorado Rapids. And I think that as Zach Steffen, so I think that this is going to be a very interesting matchup. I'm gonna go with Colorado. I think Colorado upsets the LA Galaxy and moves on to the next round. And then next one is third place Real Salt Lake. Real Salt Lake versus sixth place Minnesota United. Real Salt Lake has been was one of my favorite teams to watch this year because of just how physically and tough this team was. But I feel like they've lost whatever dog they had in them. Minnesota United is very frisky. I might just say back-to-back upsets. I think Minnesota United beats Real Salt Lake and moves on to the next round. And the fourth and fifth seed matchup, which is a very tight matchup, a very tight physical matchup. It's going to be a close one. It's the Seattle Sounders versus the Houston Dynamo, my Houston Dynamo. And I am slightly intrigued. I'm very intrigued by this. I'm very intrigued by this matchup. Houston has not performed fairly well in Seattle. I think the last time they played in Seattle was pretty close. I wish it would have gone in more favorable ways, but it didn't. Hector Herrera is back, which I think is a very important key piece. And Ponce is scoring goals, and I think that's important for them. Seattle, I think, to quote Xiao Yan from Rave Green TV, I think, as frustrating as he's seen this team, this team knows how to score goals. This team can score goals. And once again, Seattle is probably one of the best home crowds.
Fight and win! Fight and win!
You're also talking about the Dynamo, who had one of the best road records this year in their team's history. I think if the Dynamo can be physical and stay strong defensively and just somehow, someone in the attack can put one in the back of the net, this could be a very much a different game. I would love to see the Dynamo win it. I think in reality, the heart tells me to pick the Dynamo, but my brain's telling me Seattle Sounders moves on to the next round. So that's what I'm going to go with. I will be rooting for the Dynamo, and I'm going to be praying that I'm wrong on this one, but I think the Seattle Sounders moves on to the next round. So I got two upsets in the Western Conference. But all right.